Okay, today we're doing the quadratic formula to solve for quadratics. So we've talked about graphing and we've talked about factoring, but not everything factors. Not everything crosses the x-axis at a pretty point. So, all your answers when we were graphing were things like it crosses the x-axis at -4 and 6. This time we're going to get decimals and possibly some imaginary numbers like we talked about last time, okay? So to get started, we must know what the quadratic formula is. So I've written it over here in the notes area, so make sure to have yours written in the notes area as well. You'll need to know what A is. You'll definitely need to know what B is. And you also need to know what C is as part of the formula. So if you're a highlighting person, that's what you want to highlight. It must be set equal to 0, which if you look at our examples, they both are. So let's get started. And I might run out of room, so I'm probably going to have to go, I'll go down here and then I'll move over here and start going down as well. So A is 2, B is 6, and C is 3. There's no negatives, so A, B, or C is not negative. I have a little song for the quadratic formula, and there's many out there. There's not just this one. This one is x equals -b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. But you don't have to memorize it because you're going to be able to use your notes on your test, so it'll be fine, right? Okay. So -b is sometimes referred to as opposite b. So right now, sorry, my wrist is getting in the way. Right now, b is 6. Opposite 6 is -6. Plus or minus square root 6 squared. Anytime I substitute that in, I'm going to put parentheses. Minus 4ac. That bar goes all the way across. I also need to enforce that's a parenthesis, not a 1. All over, so notice my fraction bar goes all the way from beginning to end. Do not shorten that fraction bar. 2 times a is 2. Okay. My next step is to put this entire part right here, no square root, in my calculator to figure out what that is. If you're really good at mental math, you don't even need your calculator. But for the rest of us, we're going to put 6 squared minus 4 times 2 times 3. So 6 squared minus 4 times 2 times 3. And I get 12. So notice I did not type in a square root, so it's still hanging out there. Then I am going to simplify. 2 times 2 is 4. Now this is technically the answer. It is not, but it is not the most simplified answer. So to simplify it, we have to simplify square roots. Some of us may remember how to do it, and if you remember how to do it with no type of help from technology, then by all means, absolutely use how you know how to simplify. For the rest of us who want to use technology to help us, Desmos, we type in the number under square root with no square root, so we will not use the square root. And we're going to put it over x squared. Then we're going to hit settings, table, and go as far, and then let me talk it through before we decide on how to write the directions there, okay? So I'm about to switch to Desmos. So delete what's there. I'm going to do 12 because that's what was under our radical, divided by x squared. We don't care what the graph looks like. Don't stress about the graph. I'm going to hit settings and show my table here. And what I want to do is put in some x values until I get something less than 1. Okay, I have less than 1. I know that nothing below that, let me back up, less than 1 in the y value. Notice it's 0.75. I just want to make sure that I can't go lower than that. So once it's less than 1, no more. So then I want to know of those previous numbers, that's a decimal. Don't like that. 2, however, does not give me a decimal. It gives me 3. So 2, 3 on my table. So for this example, I had, when I went as far down as I could on the table, I had 2, 3 on my XY table in Desmos, right? So that means that the square root of 12 is equal to 2 square root 3. Okay, so how does that help me? That means I'm going to rewrite this as -6 plus or minus 2 square root 3 all over 4. So notice what I changed there. I changed the square root of 12 to the square root of 2 square root of 3. Why did I do that? Because that means I can simplify even further. So now, if I look here, here, and here, I will notice that all of those things are divisible by 2. So I'm going to go through and divide them by 2. So -6 divided by 2 is -3. -2 divided by 2 is 1, so 1 square root of 3. And 4 divided by 2 is 2. This is my final answer. Okay. So let's make some correlations here for a second. -6 let's first start with plus. Square root of 12 all over, all over 6 gives me this decimal. -3 plus square root of 3 all over 2 the bottom was 4, wasn't it? So notice these are equal. So what did I do? These are the two answers from here and here. I typed in the plus. I could also type in, I could change those pluses to minuses because there's 2 answers. So if I make that a minus and this a minus, notice they're still equal. Now, what happens if I type in the original function? I don't remember what C was. C was 3. Notice, what are my x-intercepts? You'll notice that that other decimal there is the decimal that I had when I did a plus sign, right? So there's still the x-intercepts as long as they cross the x-axis. So A cheat method, so to speak, would be to type in answers and see which ones match the decimals of the x-intercepts, especially if you're given a multiple choice. What happens, though, if we do one that maybe doesn't give us real numbers? So let's try this one. I think this one goes quicker. So opposite B, I think I want to use a different color I haven't used yet. Okay, opposite B is positive 2. Plus or minus square root. This is where parentheses are important, because if B is negative, I have to put parentheses for sure. 4AC. All over 2A. We're going to simplify the easiest part first. 2 times 3 is 6. Next, I'm going to put that part in my calculator, no square root. Okay, so I get negative 80. And this, my friends, is where the imaginary number comes into play. So if I have a negative under the square root, I automatically know that it's going to come out as I in front of that radical symbol. So notice where I placed it. That is important. Okay. So negative under the square root means I. Then I want to simplify 80 divided by x squared. I'm going to look at the table. So I am repeating steps that we've already talked about. Notice I have 220 there. All right, 3 is not small enough. What if I do 8? Almost. 9? Okay, 9. Okay, I know the number has to be less than 9. 8 doesn't work. 7 doesn't work. 6 doesn't work. 5 doesn't work. 4 works. So I'm going to stop there. 4 works. So the numbers I'm going to use is 4, 5. So this is going to simplify with a 4 outside joining the I, and a 5 staying home under the radical is how I like to word it, over 6. And last but not least, let's reduce fractions. Those 3 numbers are all divisible by 2. So I get this as my final answer. Now, how does that relate to the graph? Let's check this out. Wrong one. Oh, well, that parabola doesn't cross the x-axis at all. So it doesn't have any real solutions. And so that's why I got I in my answer. Okay? No x-intercepts means I in my answer. And that is why. I like math because it's a set of rules that don't change. You just got to figure out the rules. I'm good at figuring out the rules. You just don't need to change them on me. That's just kind of my personality, which may be why I like math so much. Okay. For this one, for example 2, what happens if it actually simplifies nicer? Notice you can use a different method there. But I'm just going to do it with quadratic formula because quadratic formula always works. Now, you'll notice that it's kind of longer than some of the other ways that we've talked about. So you only want to use it if you have to. But if you're not sure whether any of the other methods work, don't worry, use quadratic formula because it always works. Okay, so A is 6, B is 1 here because there's only one x there, and then C is negative 15. So negative 1 plus or minus square root 1 squared minus 4 times 6 times negative 15. All over 2a. Simplify the easy stuff first. 2 times 6 is 12. Okay, so I have 1 squared. Let me make sure I use those right numbers, right? 6 and negative 15, okay. And then I want to do 361 divided by x squared to see how that simplifies. Looking at the table. Ooh, that number's pretty big. So let's go up quite high. So like if I do 20, nope, too small. 19 and 1. Well, that's weird. 19 and 1. So think about that for a second. If I have 19 and 1, that means I have 19 square root of 1. Well, what is the square root of 1? Well, that's just 1, and 19 times 1 is 19. So that happens when something is a perfect square. So here's what I mean. If I just typed in on Desmos square root, oops, let's get rid of that. Square root of 361. It's just the perfect 19. No radical, no nothing. It's just 19. So I'm just going to put a 19 there, which means that I can simplify further. Here's what your plus or minus truly means. Like up here, I've just been keeping them together, hanging out, and you've probably been like, what is that symbol? It means that I can split them up. It means that one of my answers is negative 1 plus 19 divided by 12. And one of my answers is negative 1 minus 19 over 12. So it means that I can split that plus or minus up. But I've told you this before, I'll tell you this again. Mathematicians are lazy and they don't want to write that equation twice with the only difference being one symbol. So they made up their own symbol here so that they only had to write it once. Okay. Now notice we can simplify that. What is negative 1 plus 19? Well, that's 18. What's negative 1 minus 19? Well, that's negative 20. Those fractions do reduce. So if you are good at reducing in your head, please do so now and stretch that brain power. If you're unsure and you're like, oh, I hate fractions, no worries. Desmos is there for you. 18 divided by 12. And I hit the little fraction button over here under the 1. And it tells me, hey, that's 3/2. What about negative 20 divided by 12? Hit the little fraction button. That's negative 5/3. Wrong button. Now, I will tell you that this is factorable using that snowflake method that we did. And then we would set each one of those equal to 0, solve, and we would get 3/2 and negative 5/3. We could also do 6x squared. I've already forgotten what all my other ones are. I'm so sorry that this goes back and forth because I know that's a little dizzying for you guys. If I graph this way, I get those fractions. So 1.5 as a fraction is 3/2, and negative 1.6 repeating, which is what that decimal is negative 5/3. All right, so we are finished with quadratic formula for the most part. What we're going to talk about now is something called the discriminant. Okay, and there are three major things that we need to know. To find the discriminant, we're going to use b squared minus 4ac on every problem. Okay? If less than 0, so if you're not sure which symbol that is, that's less than. Good note taking there. Then no real solutions and 2 imaginary solutions or complex solutions. If greater than 0, then 2 real, 0 imaginary. And if it equals 0, then 1 real solution. Okay, our graphs will also help us with that. If it is less than 0, it will be a parabola that does not touch the x-axis. If it's greater than 0, it's going to be a parabola that crosses the x-axis twice. If the discriminant is equal to 0, it's going to touch the x-axis and then bounce back up. So if someone asks you to describe the nature of the solutions, all you have to do is b squared minus 4ac. That's much shorter than the quadratic formula, but also remember that it's actually the part under the radical. B squared minus 4ac is under the radical. All right, so 8 squared minus 4 times 16 times 1. If you're a mental math genius, please keep using that mental math. For the rest of us that need a calculator, we might do something like this. And we get 0. So that means it has 1 real solution. Here's what that looks like graphed. Notice 1 real solution at -1/4. All right, one more problem and this video is finally finished, you guys. Thank you for holding on. That one doesn't write well. I need to make some more colors on here. All right. B squared minus 4ac. All right, so 5 squared minus 4 times 2 times 6 is -23. Remember, if it is a negative number, that is less than 0, so it has no real solution. And it has 2 imaginary solutions. All right, so last thing, let's look at it on the graph. So and notice it does not cross the x-axis. The lowest it goes is right there. It does not cross that horizontal axis. So that's why it's 2 imaginary solutions and no real solutions. Okay, so quadratic formula recap is the longest that we do in this section. It is the most math to work through, but it always works no matter what. Okay, So now you will work on your practice target to complete this section.